I've changed the title of this presentation. I prefer Analyzing Massacre. I'd like to explain why. But let me first to introduce myself. In a former life, I was a psychologist, and I've reincarnated myself in a historian and political scientist. But I feel all right. Except sometimes I wonder who I am. I present the main results of my research on genocide in a book entitled Purify and Destroy, The Political Use of Massacre and Genocide, published in the US in 2007 and now available in 8 languages. I'm the founder of an academic website, massviolence.org, whose aim is to disseminate the most reliable knowledge, academic knowledge, on these so sensitive topics. I'm very close to Christopher Browning's approach, and I'm honored to speak just after him today. Although my work is much more comparative, I'm not taking into account only the Holocaust, we say Shoah in France, but also Rwanda, Bosnia, Cambodia, and the Armenian case. And of course, I have an interdisciplinary approach because of my background, my academic background. I'm also interested in prevention and resistance. Prevention because I was an advisor of the UN in this question, genocide prevention, and also the topic of resistance as such. See another book, a collective books, Resisting Genocide, The Plurality of Acts of Rescues, published in 2011. Just to finish this presentation, a personal note, I'm very poor-sighted, so don't be offense if I don't say hello properly to you. But certainly it's hard to work, to do research on this man's darkest deeds. But at least in my case, it's a little easier because I can look at reality in the face. Because we are late, I would like to just address quickly 3 points. First, a problem of vocabulary in this field of genocide research. Second, problem of methodology, what I call the analytical postures in this field. And third, the key issue of the group, because I agree with Itzhak Fried, the key issue is a group of killers. First, problem of vocabulary. For years, I had to deal with the notion of genocide, the G word. But it is so instrumentalized because of political and memorial uses that I found very uncomfortable to keep it as an analytical research category. So I tried to use another word, more neutral, so to speak, non-legal, certainly, the notion of massacre. I give a very empirical and sociological definition of massacre as a form of action, most often collective, so the group, destroying non-combatants, meaning soldiers who have been disarmed, women, children, elderly, and so on and so forth. I use voluntaries use destroy because it's more than killing people. It's to destroy their houses, their properties, to rape them, to burn everything. So it's larger. The Khmer Rouge did not say we kill the people, we destroy them. Of course, it doesn't resolve the problem of the definition of the word genocide, since every massacre cannot be considered as genocide, and genocide is certainly made of one or several massacres. But the first question is to understand the process, at least, which leads to massacring, to the massacre, act of massacring. And this is why I have finally proposed this title for my communication. Now the second point is which kind of methodology? Here, I am here because, because of my interdisciplinary background. And this is why I'm open to neurosciences. But let me explain what has been finally my approach. Because for a long time, I look for the best appropriate approach, because we are in a field, there is no real school of studies. We are different. We have different approach. And we are studying monstrous events. And it's like, a mountain climber looking at a mountain particularly difficult to climb. You wonder which path I'm going to use to go there, to go up. So I would like to suggest 3 paths. First, analyzing massacre as a rational practice. When a massacre has been perpetrated and made known by the press, journalists are inclined to stress its apparent irrationality. Why kill women, children, elderly people, and so on and so forth. But as political scientists, we are obliged to recognize that that kind of action has a rationality. There is a rational, among instigators and perpetrators. They are pursuing economic gains, controlling territory, taking power, destabilizing a political system, and so on and so forth. So we are obliged to take in account this calculation of mass killing. It's certainly important in political science, but there is a branch of political science which want to explain massacre and genocide through mathematical formulas. It seems to me completely bizarre. But it has to be taken into account. And it's not enough, certainly. And the second path will be to look at what might be irrational. So allow me to speak as former psychologist to say it's easy when you study, discourses of perpetrators, of instigators, to identify elements of paranoia as they demonize their enemy. Saul Friedlander, already mentioned this morning, speak about the paranoid discourses of the Nazis. And even if you look at, if you witness the evolution of a civil war, first you can witness a disproportionate effect between retaliation and counter-retaliation. So the rational dimension first detected in the Civil War tends to descend into a kind of irrationality. And the repetitive killings tends to deregulate the men who are committing them. Let's remember also the Primo Levi words in his famous books talking about Auschwitz. There is something mad over here. So I belong to them, to those who don't want to forget, omit this irrational dimension. But of course you have to take into account the other one, the rationality. So I rather speak about what I call the delirious rationality of massacre and mass killing, or the delusional rationality of extreme violence. Although reaching this point, you might be misguided, because as many studies demonstrate, Browning in history, psychology, you mentioned Milgram, Zimbardo, I'm studying all of these authors in my course in Sciences Po in Paris, on genocide. It's obvious. These acts are perpetrated by normal, ordinary people in Browning sense of the word. So you need to overcome this rational, irrational approach, normal versus madness dimension, to reach a third one. You feel this is my favorite one, but it doesn't mean that I forgot the two former. I suggest a three-dimension approach. And this third approach, this third analytical approach, is to understand massacre as a mental process. It plays in our head. It means what? It means that the mental process comes from a vision of another, to be stigmatized, to be persecuted, to be exploited, raped, expulsed, killed, partly or totally. Anthropology and history are certainly provide certainly the most appropriate tools to analyze this hostile representation of the other. And this mental process is made of reality and fantasy. It's a mixture of fear, resentment, vengeance, purity. It goes to what I call the imaginary construct of social destructiveness. This is my chapter 1. And this process leads to a polarization between us and them. Us, I mean we the people. We have to defend ourselves against them. We are to defend our nation, our race, our glory, our religion, whatever. Against them, against this enemy which is within and without of society. And there are two figures of the enemy that you can encounter in many, many different conflicts. First, the suspicious other, the suspicious enemy. He looks like us, but he's against us. He pretends he's for the revolution, but actually this is a bourgeois. He says he's for the regime, but he belongs to the guerrilla. So he has fundamentally, a double face, a double side, and we have to kill them. This is a political enemy. Let's not forget that the concentration camp in the Nazi Germany have been built first to put the communist and the socialist opponents to Hitler regime. And remember that Pol Pot, in the context of the war against Vietnam, said we have to destroy the spirit Vietnamese in the Khmer body. And the second figure of the enemy is the other in excess. This is the superfluous other. This one, it doesn't look like us. He has a big nose. He doesn't have the same blood than us, doesn't have the same religion. And this excess of the other is not only qualitative, is as well quantitative. It tends to be too numerous. It tends to proliferate, as in sex. So there is this vocabulary of dehumanization coming up. Of course, these two figures of the enemy are overlapped in the same historical situation very often. And through this polarization, us against them, we arrive to what I call an ideological frame. I take here an expression of Irving Goffman, which might lead to massacre. But that's a process. It's completely, fortunately, unpredictable or less predictable. Anyway, there is uncertainty. I like this expression by Michael Mann: the road to mass killing is a circuitous one. But I agree, fundamentally agree with Timothy Snyder when he says that ideology cannot kill by itself, on its own. Ideology needs to be incorporated, embedded in state organization, state institution. If so, the situation becomes very dangerous because army, police, and different state agencies could, lead to mass killing in particular situation, like in the Nazi Germany or in Rwanda. But it's also true for non-state organization. I mean, guerrilla army or terrorist network. And then we all agree, I guess, that the basic operational structure is a group of killers. And let me to finish by this point. Depending on the situation, these groups of killers are made of military people, policemen, paramilitaries, civilian as neighbors. Let's not forget child soldiers. Well, their brains are not completely formed. I don't know what you could say as neuroscientists about that. And I think most of us agree with these basic factors to explain the process of massacring: impunity, obedience, conformity. Let's not forget gratification, sexual or financial gratification, career, division of labor in the killing field, absorption of alcohol and drugs, and so on and so forth. If you look at that kind of terrible picture, I don't think the notion of banality of evil put by Hannah Arendt is very relevant. I disagree. I have a lot of respect for this philosopher, but I disagree with her for since the beginning of my work about her view on this. As you may know, Hannah Arendt did not attend to the Eichmann trial, just at the beginning. And she describes Eichmann as a high civil servant just obeying orders, Hitler's orders, and this is wrong. Since almost recently, an Eichmann biography demonstrates that Eichmann was, a Nazi, very convinced, having a strong anti-Semitic personality. I think more interesting, this name has not been cited this morning, by the work of Robert Lifton, who was a psychiatrist. His book is The Genocidal Personality. And Lifton argues that the repetitive killers are characterized by personality dissociation, he say. The more they are killing, the more they develop a sort of a second self, here, the word self, which tend to detach from the first one and even to take control of it. I think this is an interesting track. Now, what about ideology? Christopher raised as well this issue. We might wonder, before taking action, if these killers belong to a minority of fanatic or a majority of ordinary people in Browning sense. As soon as these people are engaged, caught up in the process of mass killing, I believe this question becomes secondary. Why? Because when they are engaged in this process, in a group, in this group they become different, they are subject to a sort of metamorphose, they have to find justification of what they are doing. Of course, there is the impact, the influence of propaganda. But even if this propaganda said that these people are just insects, they have human faces. And so they need to reinvent, they need to make sense of what they are doing. They need to find new justification on their own, on their personal basis. And sometimes they cannot, so they stop. It's interesting to study, and I agree with Christopher as well, to look at the people who say finally, no, I cannot. But most of them are going there, and while doing so, I like this expression of the anthropologist Alexander Hinton. There are meaning makers. Perpetrators are meaning makers. He used this metaphor of bricolage. They are not simply automatons, passive automatons. They are engaged in this process of mass killing, and they are bricoleurs of what they are doing, what they are thinking in the process. That's the very act of massacring which oblige them to do so. In other words, in order to live, men need to make sense of their life. They have to do the same in order to kill. And this is why massacre is above all a mental process. And obviously, there are connections with neurosciences in that regard. Now, the question is, to some extent, we can understand this connection. I agree as well, again, with Christopher. That's a problem of causes and effects. But I would be more radical, saying that I don't think through medical treatment we are going to eradicate mass killings in the world, because these monstrous events have first political, social, and international causes. Thank you.